Hi, I'm Matthew Morris, and I want to share what I found out about rats in New York. So I came across a data set a couple of years ago that showed rat sighting incidents from 2010 to 2017. And I've always been curious to dig into it, so I figured this was a great opportunity to take a look at this data and see what it had to offer. The question that I'm asking is, are rats taking over New York? I figure this is a relevant topic. Whenever I think about New York, rats aren't the first thing that come to mind, but definitely if somebody mentions rats in New York, I think, yes, there's probably quite a few. We see it in movies and media portrayed. Um, Famous movies like American Tail. I mean, it's a cartoon, but it's all about rats in New York. And when somebody wants to show a gritty image of New York, you usually see a rat running across somewhere. And so this is just something that has kind of stuck with me, and I figured, okay, let's go ahead and take a look at this. Also becomes a little bit relevant too when you think about rats. As a domesticated animal, they might make a great pet, and they can be entertaining when they're in shows. However, in large packs and infestations of rats can be a hygienic problem. They've been known historically to carry diseases such as bubonic plague, the black plague. They've carried a lot there, and somebody might argue it was the fleas or whatever. It doesn't matter. They were carriers of this disease, and so if there are rats growing in population and it is not being controlled, that could pose a problem. So I'm going to go ahead and take you into one of the first steps that I did with this data. I was able to grab it from kaggle.com, and it's a CSV format, so it's very easy to download. The data was very clean as far as like formatting goes. There were some issues though with missing data, which I'll share in just a minute. The data does originate, however, from the city of New York, and it looks like their website is updating the data more frequently. And so while I'm not using it today, that is something that is out there and available for somebody who wants to do more research. So when I took the CSV, the first thing that I did is I decided to have a copy of it in my spreadsheet. This is what I do when I'm reviewing any table. It's small enough because there's only about 101,000 records in here that I was able to do an exploration over all of it just through Excel. The next thing I do is I take a look at all the counts. I count numeric, I count alpha, I count blank just to see if I have any kind of issues with the data right off the bat. I take a swipe as whether or not I think something is a dimension or a measure, and what kind of character type or string type or numeric varchar, how I might try to load it into a table. If I have measures, I will use these formulas in order to understand the data a little bit more. One of the tough things about this data set is there's no measures. One of the great things about this data set is it's very rich in location information. So here you can see you have latitude and longitudes, you have uh, intersections, you have location types, you have whether or not it's near a landmark. So that actually provided quite a bit. Once I have this done, the next step that I do is actually pivot the information. It's a little bit easier to read this way to see what kind of issues might be going on with it. And then I just let myself get curious. Whether it's relevant to the question at hand or not, I just let my mind kind of wander, and in curiosity, this helps me connect with the data, get familiar with it, and maybe actually evolve my question or come up with other questions that would complement the overall research question. Then from there, I actually go back to this and see if I can answer any of these just manually. I don't want to click on any of these right now to do filters because it could take a while for it to load. However, that's what I do is I click on these, I see, okay, is this going to load? The other thing that I do is I look at these filters is I'll open them up to see if there's only one value in the field that's just going to be repeating the entire time. If it does, I don't need that value. I don't need that record, so I'll probably end up removing it. So finally, I put my notes together on and give myself a little bit of homework here. Some of my notes are on fields that I just want to get rid of. I want to remove some noise. That's the first thing that I do. So these is fields that I removed and why I removed them. These ones are just completely blank. These ones maybe have just one piece of data, as mentioned before, like DOHMH is just repeated constantly throughout the whole thing and nothing else. There's no other values. And then these ones were not relevant to the analysis. One of the other things that I noticed is there were some issues with the dates. So when you look at the sightings from 2010 to 2012, there's a lot of sparseness, and then all of a sudden there's just a massive amount of incidents that were all loaded at midnight. That to me shows that there was some issues with how they were recording their information. It seems to even out around 2012, and so I made a choice to only look at data from 2012 to 2017. The other thing is, even after 2012, while there's incidents being loaded every day now, there's still some that are just loaded at midnight. So I decided to not look down to the hour level, but only look at the day level. And then finally, with the data, there was a status of the case. So the incident could have just been created, it could be pending, it could be closed. What I wanted to do is see only cases that had a create date and a close date, and the status of it was closed. So that would be what would be in my analysis. When I did those filters on this, the data set went from being about a decent 101,000 sightings, almost 102,000, down to just under 60,000 sightings. Still some fun data to work with, but just to kind of put it in perspective, when we're looking at these sightings, we're really working off of this sample of the data that I'm deeming as clean. So after getting that Excel spreadsheet kind of cleaned up, I decided that what I wanted to do was load the data into pgadmin. I think it's a good practice to not be using Excel as a database, but to rather use an RDBMS. I'm a fan favorite of Postgres. So I created a pretty simple script here, or not a script actually, but a pretty simple load. And I'll bring this over here. So I then created this rats table down here, which I can run a quick query on so that you can see that the data has actually been loaded into here. Not the most complex query by far, but still just kind of showing that indeed the data is loaded. And here we have the data successfully loaded. So once this was loaded into Postgres, I fired up Tableau, and I can take you through some of what I built in Tableau just to kind of see more preparations that I did. Let's go ahead and unhide this a little bit. And we can actually see, let's go to the data source. You can see I'm connected to Postgres here. I'm not going to go through the whole sign-in process, but this is where the data is coming from, not from the spreadsheet. So one of the things that I did here is I created some folder structures here in order to organize my data. I also then created some hierarchies. So I created a hierarchy based off of location, and I created some groups within location, which I'll talk to in a minute. Down here in the measures, the way that I was able to do anything was by creating counts off of the incidents and creating a open to close. I have a misspell there, but an open to close delta. So we could see how long it would take people to close incidences out. And then I created some quick calculations for that may or may not have been useful. I just wanted to kind of have them there as a resource for ranks of incidences, percent of total, percentiles, moving averages, running totals. So I brought these in to just have at the ready if I wanted to use them. And here you can see just a basic calculation here. So on to the fun part. I finally decided to assemble a dashboard that looked pretty relevant to me, and I will take you through that next. So this is the rat sightings in New York dashboard. What we can see here, obviously, is Brooklyn and Manhattan are getting most of the sightings, getting the lion's shares of the sightings. If we click on this, it's going to filter the entire dashboard. So now we're just looking at Brooklyn. We can switch this to Manhattan, which is a pretty nice feature of this dashboard, so we can really narrow in. If we just wanted to look at the Bronx here and just 3+ families, we could do that as well to see how that's actually going to play out. So all of these are interactive and work together to help you slice and dice the analysis for the user to just explore and come up with insights that are beyond the developer. So these are the sightings by borough, and then down here we have the sightings by type of location. And in the type of location, I noticed that there were family mixed, and I decided to group all of these together. So that's the line that you see here. This makes up over 80% or 88% of the sightings are family homes. Down here, what we have is a time to close the incident and the number of sightings. Now, you may be saying, well, why is this scatter plot kind of over in this corner, almost forgotten about, and a little bit smaller? It's because I think there's some value to it, but it's not overwhelming. Here we can see that like Brooklyn is got a negative correlation of time to close the number of sightings. So it doesn't prove out a theory that, hey, the longer it takes sightings to close, the more risk you have for outbreak. Whereas in areas like Queens, we are seeing a correlation. So we have a decent correlation in Queens. We have a decent correlation in the Bronx. We don't really have a substantial negative correlation in Manhattan. I would say a substantial one in Brooklyn, and then Staten Island's pretty flat. Overall, I would say if they begin cleaning their data up and they start working with their making sure that they're closing their incidences out, they're not loading things at midnight, we'll have more accurate data and this would be more relevant. And my overall feeling, just by looking at some of this, is that these areas are loading their data more correctly, and that overall, if we see Brooklyn and these other locations loading their data more correctly, we would probably see a positive correlation throughout all of this. Coming to here, this is really kind of one of the fun parts of the visualization, and that is we can press play on this and we can watch over time the rat sightings. And as you watch this, it's fascinating to see the numbers kind of shrink over here in the Queens area, almost Long Island area, and grow in the Manhattan area. So if you watch it over time, you can see a movement of sightings where it does get smaller and then it gets larger into the cities. There's also some areas where you can kind of see some outbreaks up here in the Bronx. So coming down here to probably the one that is one of the stronger arguments, this is a line chart with a regression to show a forecast of where we think we're headed with it based off where we've been. So when we look at this, we do see that there is a trend where the rats are growing over time from the peak in 2012 August of 1,120 sightings to peak in July of 2017 of 1,701 sightings, about a 44% increase. And it looks like based on all of this, because we do have some pockets where it goes down, but overall it's going up and it looks like it's going to continue to go up. One of the things to notice are the peaks here are in the summer months. I would have thought winter. When I first came into this, I thought, okay, there were probably more sightings in the winter time, but the reverse is true. I was thinking, okay, wintertime, rats probably go inside. And instead, what you see is in the winter, sightings go down. And that could be because they're perhaps going into the sewers, and so people are not seeing them as much. Another thing to call out when you're going through this visualization and you're looking at this, you might think, okay, well, there's not a lot of sightings here. Well, not too many people are going to be sighting a rat in like a public stairwell or a public garden or parking lot. But if one is in your house, you're going to call somebody. That's kind of what I take away from this. There's not going to be a lot of calls about rats in a vacant lot unless the lot is right next to your house, maybe. So that's something to take away from this. Overall, what I can see from this is there's a need for more accuracy in the creation and close dates from the pest control agencies that are working these tickets. And I could also see an effort for education and uh, just information and activity for pest control to kind of be more active, probably in the fall, or not in the fall, but in the springtime as a prevention measure to the busy summer months coming up with rat sightings. And then finally, I would like to see more analysis and have some more information just about in this region of Queens, because I think there could be some preventative measures going on to keep rats from going into the city areas from the suburb, and control efforts could go here to overall help reduce the amount of rats being sighted in New York. And so that is my presentation on rat sightings in New York. I hope that you enjoyed it. Thank you very much.